The quiet fall of a super-started cameras had just stopped rolling. The lights dimmed. The crew began packing up. And Tom Cruise sat alone. In that moment, no cheers, no fame, no adrenaline. It's just silence. His hands were shaking. Not because of fear, but because he had finally made a decision. It's the one he had avoided for years. He was going to walk away from it all. From Hollywood, from movies, from the world that had once lifted him so high. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes staring at the floor of the soundstage. All around him, echoes of his past life. Stunt wires, broken props, bullet holes carved into fake walls. It should have felt familiar, comforting even. But now it just felt empty. Hollow. Earlier that day, the director had whispered something behind his back. A young co-star had ignored his advice on a difficult scene. Social media had turned on him, again calling him outdated, too old, trying too hard. He could take the punches before. But now it felt different, heavier. His phone buzzed. One message. It was short. Heard you rapped. Want to grab tea? Tom stared at the name. He hadn't spoken to Keanu in months. Maybe longer. Their paths had crossed at award shows, at private dinners, and on rare movie sets. Always polite, always respectful, but never too close. Still, something in that message felt safe. He typed back. Sure. They met at a small tea shop tucked between bookstores in Los Feliz. No paparazzi, no bodyguards, just the two of them. Keanu walked in first, calm as ever, wearing a loose black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. He greeted Tom with a quiet smile. No questions, it's just a hand on his shoulder. They sat in the corner. The waiter brought 2 cups of oolong. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence was warm, not uncomfortable. Tom finally broke it, I think. I'm done, he said, not looking up. Keanu blinked slowly. With what? Everything, Tom said. Films. The public. The whole circus. I feel tired. Keanu stirred his tea gently. It's okay to feel tired. No, Tom, said, voice shaking now. You don't get it. People look at me and see a machine, like I'm supposed to keep jumping off buildings forever. But inside I'm breaking, and nobody sees that. Keanu sat still, completely focused. I wake up, Tom continued, and I wonder if anything I do matters anymore. If people even care, or if they're just waiting to see me fail. Keanu nodded, then asked one quiet question. When was the last time you cared about what you wanted? Tom was silent. Keanu leaned in. You've given everything to this world, Tom. Every ounce of your energy. Every smile. Every risk. Every drop of sweat. And now the world's noise is drowning out your own voice. Tom looked up, eyes moist. I don't even remember what my voice sounds like, he whispered. That night they walked under the streetlights. No guards, no fans. Just 2 men who had carried the weight of the world for too long. Keanu told him stories he had never shared. Before, about grief. About losing someone and still having to smile on camera the next day. About how the applause never filled the emptiness inside. And how one day he realized he didn't need the world to clap. He just needed to feel peace inside his own chest. I didn't quit, Keanu said, but I stopped chasing the noise, and I started listening to the silence. That's where the truth is, Tom asked. How do you start again, when you feel broken? Keanu looked up at the stars, by being honest, and by allowing yourself to rest without guilt. They stood. In silence, for the first time in years, Tom felt something stir inside him. Not excitement, not ambition, just stillness, but life wasn't about to let him off the hook that easily. The very next morning, Tom got a call from his agent. There's something you need to see, the voice said. It was a leaked video, behind-the-scenes footage. Someone had filmed Tom during a breakdown on set, yelling, crying, talking to himself. The internet was already tearing it apart. Headlines screamed, "Has Tom Cruise lost it?" People mocked, edited, turned it into memes. It went viral within hours. Tom stood in his apartment, frozen, The coffee in his hand went cold. Just when he thought he had nothing left to lose, the world found a new way to humiliate him. He turned off his phone, locked the door, sat on the floor, and for hours he didn't move. But something unexpected happened. Keanu showed up. Not with cameras, not with speeches. He just knocked, waited, and sat outside the door when Tom didn't open it. He stayed there. For hours, just waiting. No judgment. No pressure. And inside, Tom sat on the other side of that door, listening, crying quietly. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in his sadness. And in that silence, something began to change. A door finally opened. Night had passed slowly. City outside moved on, but inside that apartment, time felt frozen. Tom didn't sleep. He barely breathed. He just sat near the door, back against the wall, listening to the faint sound of someone sitting outside. No words, no knocks, just quiet presence. It was Keanu. As the first light of morning slipped through the window blinds, Tom finally stood up, placed one hand on the doorknob. He hesitated. Then, with trembling fingers, he turned it and opened the door. Keanu looked up slowly, as if he had been waiting forever, yet wasn't in any rush. His eyes didn't judge. They didn't pity. They simply acknowledged coffee. Tom whispered. Keanu smiled gently. "Only if you're having some." They sat at the kitchen table, to mugs, quiet steam rising. No one said much. There was no need. In that moment, Keanu gave Tom something no fame, no money, no award had ever given him: space to feel human. "You know," Tom finally said, staring into his mug, "I've always been afraid of being seen like that. Raw, unfiltered, out of control. That video, it ruined something." Keanu didn't interrupt. He let him finish. "I spent decades building this image. Strong, confident, reliable. Now, it's all shattered. People think I'm weak." Keanu took a slow breath. "Or maybe they're finally seeing that you're real." Tom blinked. "Real? Yeah." Keanu said softly, "People don't connect with perfection. They connect with truth. And sometimes the truth is messy." Tom looked away. The words stung, but not because they were harsh. They stung because they were right. Later that day, they went for a walk through a quiet canyon trail where no one would recognize them. The path was lined with dry brush and birdsong. As they climbed a steep slope, Tom asked something that had been stuck in his chest for years. "Keanu, how do you keep going? How do you stay so calm?" Keanu stopped walking. He picked up a small stone, studied it, then tossed it off the trail. "I stopped running away from the silence," he said. "I stopped pretending I had to have all the answers. I learned to accept that some days, all I can do is breathe." They sat on a bench at the top of the hill, the city stretching. Wide below them, Keanu looked out and said, "We give the world our strength, our energy, our time. But what are we giving ourselves?" Tom didn't have an answer. "Maybe," Keanu said, "it's time to stop being a product and start being a person again." That evening, Keanu asked Tom to come with him to a small gathering. No press, no cameras. Just people, artists, writers, old friends. Tom hesitated, but agreed. The house was in the valley. Warm lights, music from a record player, the smell of homemade food. People laughed, shared stories, played the guitar. And when Tom walked in, no one rushed him. No one treated him like a star. They welcomed him like an old friend. At first, he didn't know how to respond. He felt awkward, unsure where to stand, what to say. But then a young woman approached him. "I saw the video," she said. Tom froze, "and it made me respect you more. I've been there. That place where everything feels too loud. Thank you for being real." Tom's eyes filled with tears. Whispered, "Thank you," and walked to the back porch to catch his breath. Keanu followed him quietly. "See," he said, "not everyone sees weakness. Some see truth." That night something shifted in Tom. He realized the world wasn't waiting for him to be perfect anymore. Maybe it never was. It was he who feared imperfection most. He began to speak more openly with Keanu about his childhood, about the loneliness he carried, about the pressure to perform, to smile, to never crack. And Keanu, in return, shared his own darkness, the quiet grief he lived with every day, the ways he healed slowly, patiently, honestly. They became something neither expected. Not co-stars, not colleagues, but true friends. A week later, Tom got another call. A new director wanted him for a serious role, a dramatic indie film. Small budget, no stunts, just raw acting. His agent said, "You can say no. It's not your usual style." But Tom was quiet. He thought about it. For the first time in a long while, he said, "Maybe that's exactly why I should say yes." He hung up, turned to Keanu and said, "I want to do it. Not to prove anything, just to feel something real." Keanu smiled. "Good," he said. "Then let's make it honest." And so, Tom began preparing. But as he stepped into this new role, one more challenge appeared, one that neither of them expected, something that would test everything they had just rebuilt. A face from Tom's past, a betrayal he thought he had buried, someone who wasn't ready to let him move on. Shadows from the past. It started with a knock, soft, quiet, unexpected. Tom had just returned home from a late-night rehearsal. The indie project had become his world. He poured himself into the role. No green screens, no wires, just emotion. Every day he found a new part of himself he hadn't seen in years. He walked toward the door, a towel around his neck, sweat still clinging to his skin. When he opened it, he froze. Standing there was Brad. Not Brad Pitt. Not another actor. Just Brad. His former stunt double. His closest friend once. They hadn't spoken in 10 years. "Hey," Brad said, voice low. "Can we talk?" They sat in silence for a long time. Brad looked older now, more tired. The fire in his eyes had dimmed. "I saw the video," he finally said. "Everyone has. But that's not why I'm here." Tom leaned back in the chair. "Then why are you here?" Brad stared at the floor. "'Cause I owe you something. And maybe you owe me something too." Those words sliced through the air. Years ago, Tom and Brad had fallen out. It was quiet, painful, and never really talked about. There was a stunt one that went wrong. Brad had been seriously hurt. Tom had been pushed to keep filming. No one took the blame, but everyone knew the tension was there. "I should have stood up for you," Tom said softly. "I was afraid they'd cut me out too. Afraid the film would tank. I let the studio bury what happened." Brad looked up, eyes tired but honest, "and I let myself hate you for it. But I wasn't perfect either. I took the settlement. I walked away, but I never healed." Tom swallowed hard. "Neither did I." He talked through the night. Pain, guilt, confusion. All of it spilled out like water from a dam. Years of silence shattered in one honest conversation. Keanu arrived halfway through. Tom had called him quietly, unsure of how the night would go. He didn't speak much, just listened. He let them process what had been buried for too long. When Brad stood to leave, he turned and said, "I heard you're doing a new film. Something real." Tom nodded, double quotes. "Maybe that's what this world needs more of. Not blockbusters, but truth." Over the next few weeks, Tom worked harder than he had in years, but not to impress. Not to reclaim anything. This time, he worked to express, to understand who he was without the mask. The script was powerful. A man confronting his mistakes, facing the weight of fame, finding love again after betrayal. It mirrored his real life. So closely that some scenes brought him to tears on set. Keanu visited often. He wasn't part of the film, but he became something more important, a guide. A soul standing beside Tom as he rebuilt himself. One day after filming, Tom found Keanu sitting outside, eyes lost in the sunset. "You okay?" Tom asked. Keanu hesitated. "Yeah, just thinking." About what? Keanu's voice dropped. How easy it is to lose yourself, even when you think you're found. Tom sat beside him. You know, Keanu said, there was a time I nearly gave it all up too. Tom looked at him, surprised. Years ago, Keanu continued. After the losses, the loneliness. The silence felt heavier than any applause could. Fixed Tom waited. But then someone said something that changed everything. They told me I didn't have to carry the world, just my own truth. And that was enough. Tom whispered, Who told you that? Keanu smiled. Someone I didn't think was listening. A stranger in a bookstore. They both laughed. It wasn't a big moment. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real, as the final week of filming approached. Critics began whispering. News outlets were curious. What is Tom Cruise doing in an indie drama? Some mocked him, but others felt intrigued. And then came the twist no one expected. A journalist known for harsh interviews asked for a one-on-one with Tom. It would be live, unedited. Raw to his team advised against it. But Keanu looked at him and said, You want to be real? Then let the world see that. Tom agreed. The interview was scheduled, and the night before Tom sat alone in his apartment. No script, no stunts. It's just his reflection in the mirror. But somewhere deep inside, he wasn't afraid anymore. Not because he was strong, but because he was honest. But the interview would change everything again. Not because of what Tom said, but because of who showed up halfway through the broadcast. The man who interrupted everything. These studio lights were hot. It's brighter than they needed to be. Tom sat in the center of the stage, across from the host, a sharp-tongued journalist named Diane Lawson. She was famous for cutting through Hollywood charm like a knife through butter. No filters. No soft questions. This interview was going out live, no edits, no time to fix mistakes. Tom adjusted his mic. The cameras rolled. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Diane smiled at the camera. Tonight, for the first time in years, Tom Cruise sits down with us not as an action hero, but as a man trying to rediscover himself. Welcome, Tom. He gave a quiet nod. Thanks for having me. She jumped in fast. Let's talk about the video, the one where you broke down. People say that moment ended your career. What do you say? Tom breathed in slowly. Maybe it ended something I needed to let go of. I spent a long time pretending I was okay. But that day, I wasn't pretending anymore. The room fell quiet. I thought it would destroy me, he continued. But it didn't. It reminded me I was human. Diane's expression shifted, just slightly. You disappeared for a while, she said. But now you're doing a film that's nothing like what you're known for. Why? Tom leaned forward. Because I needed to stop acting, not just on screen, but in life. That sentence hung in the air. The interview went deeper. Diane asked about regrets, about pain, about betrayal. Tom answered all of it with honesty. No rehearsed lines. No fake tears. Just truth, and then, halfway through, something strange happened. A man entered the studio quietly, stood off camera, waiting. The crew whispered. Even Diane paused for a second, confused. Tom saw him and froze. It was his father, the man he hadn't seen in over 20 years. His father, Robert Cruise, had walked out when Tom was just starting out in Hollywood. They never spoke again. No letters, no apologies, just silence. And now he was here. Diane looked at Tom. Do you want him to join us? Tom's heart pounded. He wasn't ready for this. Not now. Not live. But Keanu's words echoed in his mind. Let the world see that. Tom nodded. Robert sat down slowly. His face was older, more tired. But his eyes, those same eyes Tom saw in the mirror, were full of something unexpected. Regret, Diane. Sensing the tension, stepped back. I'll let you two speak. The cameras kept rolling. Robert looked at Tom. I saw the interview, and the film. I had to come. Tom whispered, Why now? His father's voice cracked. 'Cause I was a coward. Is it watching you break down? I saw myself. The parts I never faced. The truth I ran from. Tom couldn't speak. You became more than I ever was, Robert continued. But I never told you. I should have. I should have been there. Tears formed in Tom's eyes. I needed you back then. I know, his father said. I know. The entire studio was silent. Millions watched as two men, one broken by the past, the other crushed by absence, finally looked each other in the eyes. I'm sorry, Robert said, voice shaking. And for a long moment, Tom just stared, breathing, thinking. Then slowly he reached out, not with anger, not with judgment, but with something more powerful, forgiveness. He took his father's hand. I don't know how to fix this, Tom said, but maybe we start here. Robert nodded, eyes full of tears, and just like that, something changed inside Tom. Wait years. Heavy dash lifted. After the interview, people flooded social media, but not with hate. It's not with jokes. They called it brave, honest, human. One tweet read, "Tonight Tom Cruise didn't act. He healed, and we watched him do it." The indie film studio called the next day. They were moving the release date up. Theaters wanted it. Streaming services wanted it. People didn't care about the explosions anymore. They wanted the truth. And Tom, he wasn't running from it anymore, but life wasn't done surprising him just yet. A letter arrived. No return address. No name. Just one sentence inside. Your story saved me. Please don't stop now. Attached was a script written by someone unexpected, a name that would turn the next chapter of his life upside down. The script that shook him, Tom, held the letter in his hands for a long time. The paper felt soft, aged. Whoever had sent it didn't want to be known, not yet. The envelope had no return address, no handwriting he recognized, just those quiet words. Your story saved me. Please don't stop now. Inside was a script. The title read, The Man Who Walked Away. He started reading by page 3, his breath slowed. By page 10, his hands trembled. By page 20, he had to stop it. It wasn't just a story. It was his story. Not a copy. Not a tribute. But something deeply personal, written by someone who clearly understood everything he had buried: the loneliness, the fear, the anger, and the need to be seen not as a hero, but as a human. He turned. To the last page, at the bottom, typed in small font, was a name he hadn't seen in years. Nicole. Not just any Nicole. Nicole Kidman, his ex-wife. He sat in silence, stunned. Memories flooded in, like waves crashing through a broken dam. The red carpets, the press tours, the quiet dinners after long days, the fights, the silence, the distance. They had parted ways quietly. No loud scandals. It's just two people walking in opposite directions. He hadn't heard from her in years, and now she had written a story so raw, so personal. He didn't know whether to cry or smile. He picked up the phone. He stared at it, but instead of calling her, he called Keanu. They met at Tom's place. Same corner of the couch where Keanu had sat after the viral video. Calm as always, Tom handed him the script. Keanu read in silence. An hour passed. When he finished, Keanu looked up. This isn't just a film, he said softly. This is a mirror. Tom nodded. Should I do it? Keanu asked, do you want to? Tom hesitated. I'm scared. Good, Keanu replied. Means it matters. Tom sent a letter back to Nicole. He didn't text, didn't call. He wrote the way she had. His note was short. I read every word, and I felt seen. Thank you. Let's talk. A week later, she arrived at the same quiet tea shop where Keanu had first met him. She wore no makeup, simple clothes, her hair tied back. When she saw him, her eyes didn't blink. She just smiled gently. They sat across from each other, two people who had once shared a life, now sharing something even deeper: understanding. I wrote it after I saw the interview, she said. Tom listened quietly. Saw the man I once loved, she continued. The one who used to dream out loud, the one who hid his pain behind smiles, and I wanted to help him find his voice again. Tom whispered, you did. You didn't talk about getting back together. It wasn't about that. It was about healing. Nicole had written the script as a gift, not for money, not for credit, but because she believed in the story it needs to be told, she said. Not just for you. For everyone who's ever felt like they had to perform just to be loved. Tom agreed to do the film, but only if Keanu directed it. At first, Keanu refused. "I'm not a director," he said, but Tom looked at him, eyes steady. "You've been directing my healing this whole time, and I'll just do it in front of a camera." Keanu thought about it, then said one word. "Okay." And so began a project that no one saw coming. A film written by Nicole Kidman, starring Tom Cruise, directed by Keanu Reeves. No studio wanted it at first. Too personal, too slow. Not commercial, but they didn't care. They self-funded. They worked in silence. They built something honest, and day by day, Tom changed. He didn't perform anymore. He didn't try to impress the audience. He invited them in. On set, Keanu whispered direction, never loud, always thoughtful. Nicole visited sometimes. She stayed behind the scenes. But her presence was powerful. There was one that broke everyone. A father, sitting across from his son. Admitting he had failed him, Tom cried. Not because he was acting, but because the words felt real. "I didn't know how to love you," the father says in the film. "I only knew how to demand from you." Tom broke down after that take. The room went quiet. No one said anything. And then Keanu walked over, placed his hand on Tom's back, and said, "That was truth. That's all we ever needed." Months passed. They finished the film, but just as they began preparing for release, something unexpected happened again. A major studio executive offered them a massive deal, global release. Top-tier marketing, but only if they let the studio re-edit parts of it. Cut the emotional pauses, they said. Tighten the dialogue, make it snappier. Tom thought about it. The money, the exposure. Then he looked at Keanu, then at Nicole, and then he made a decision. He walked into the studio's office, stood before the executive, and said, "We're not cutting truth." He walked away from the deal again, and in doing so, he walked towards something more powerful than any contract is. Freedom. When the curtain rises night of the premiere arrived, but this wasn't a usual Hollywood event. There were no red carpets, no flashing cameras, no screaming crowds. They chose a quiet art house theater in Santa Monica, seats just over 200. People invited were artists, nurses, teachers, retired soldiers, single moms, students, and strangers who had written letters, people who had lived the kind of pain the film tried to honor. Keanu wore the same old hoodie he always wore. Nicole wore a simple black dress. Tom stood near the door, shaking hands, not as a celebrity, but as someone who was finally proud of what he had become. The lights dimmed. The screen lit up. The man who walked away began. The story was simple. A famous man, loved by the world, is secretly falling apart. He walks off a film set and disappears. He meets an old friend. They walk. They talk. They cry. He confronts his past, his father, his ex-wife. He forgives. He breaks. He begins again, and in the final scene, he stands in front of a mirror. He looks at himself. Really looks. He doesn't smile. He doesn't cry. He just accepts. The credits rolled. And for a moment, no one clapped. They just sat, still silent. Then slowly, someone stood, then another, and another. But they didn't cheer loudly. They placed their hands over their hearts, because this wasn't a performance. This was a reflection. After the screening, a young man walked up to Tom. He couldn't have been older than 25, eyes red, voice shaking. "My dad left when I was 10, he said, "and for years I thought something was wrong with me. But watching this, hearing those words, I think I can finally let it go." He hugged Tom, tight, then walked away. Tom stood there, overwhelmed. This wasn't about awards anymore. It was about impact. One by one, people came forward. A woman said, "My husband lost himself to depression. This film helped me understand." A teacher said, "I've seen so many kids pretending to be okay. I'm going to show this to every class I teach." Keanu stood quietly in the back, hands in his pockets, smiling softly. Over the next few weeks, the film spread, not through ads, not through hype, but through whispers. Word of mouth. It moved like a quiet wave. It reached small towns, therapy centers, prisons, schools. People watched it alone. Then with loved ones, and with communities. The film became something more than cinema. It became a mirror for those too afraid to look. One morning, Tom sat at his kitchen table reading an email from a man in Brazil who wrote, "I was going to end everything. Then I saw your story. Now I want to try again." Beneath it was a photo of the man holding his newborn daughter. Tom closed his laptop, cried. Not tears of sadness, but healing. He and Nicole stayed close not as lovers, but as companions in truth. They would speak weekly, sometimes about the past, sometimes about art, sometimes about nothing at all. One afternoon, she told him, "I wrote that script because I wanted you to see yourself the way I always saw you, not as a star, but as a survivor." Tom replied, "And I finally believe. You, Keanu, ever the quiet soul, returned to his simple life." But he and Tom would walk the trails often, just like they did that first day. No cameras, no scripts. Just pieced on one of those walks, Tom said. "You saved me, you know." Keanu smiled gently. "No, man, you saved yourself. I just waited outside the door." They kept walking, no need for more words. Awards. Season came and went. The film was nominated for several things, but when the night of the big ceremony came, Tom didn't go. Instead, he visited a small community center where they were playing the film, 2 veterans struggling with PTSD. He sat among them. No announcements, no spotlights, just a man among men who understood silence better than applause. They watched the final scene together when the screen faded to black. One old soldier leaned over and said, "Thank you, Tom, for being real." Tom turned to him. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing me." Years later, long after the buzz faded, a young girl interviewed Tom for a podcast. She asked, "What's the most important thing you've ever done?" Tom smiled. "I walked away," he said, "so I could walk back, this time as myself." She nodded and closed the interview. And somewhere, maybe in a quiet room, someone who feels alone will find that recording. And maybe, just maybe, it'll give them the strength to open their own door. Not to perform, but to be seen. Not to win, but to heal. And not to be perfect, but to be real.